My name is Steven. Today I'm just going to be walking you guys through on how to use one of my favorite websites, Lovable, which essentially creates the front end for any app or website or database or even dashboard you're trying to create. So I think the best way to do this is literally by just creating, and you guys will see I'm going to do this in like a minute or two. It's super easy. So first you load up Lovable, then you just type in the prompt. Today's prompt, I'm going to do something really creative where I read a ton of books, and I'm sure some of you guys do as well. So I'm just going to write a journal for keeping track of all the books I read and a 1 to 2 sentence summary of each of the books. And then I'm going to try to make a dashboard page that puts it all together in an easy way for me to always go back to when I'm referencing books or thinking about what to read next, or even just trying to remember what I have read. So I'll just type that in now. I want to remember and track the books I read. Please create a website journal slash dashboard for me to do so. The website should include a place to put in the book titles as well as a 1 to 2 sentence summary of the books of let's go with my takeaways from the books and let's see, and a dashboard to effectively conceptualize all of this data. So as you can see here, at first you just literally just hit enter and it starts building it up for you. And while it's doing this, I'll kind of explain my reasoning behind the prompt and how to use Lovable in general. So first I started out with, I want you to remember and track the books I read. So when you enter a Lovable prompt or really a prompt into any of these no code website creators, you always want to start by really telling it its fundamental purpose. And that's what I did in the first sentence. Then you want to elaborate a little bit on more specifically what you want. And that's where I told it that I want a website slash journal dashboard, and then you want to lastly go into detail. Something you'll also notice is that this website, the front end of it, would obviously be a lot more complicated in the long term, but I only gave it a couple sentences. So when you do use these LLMs, you like it's totally fine to give it more information. But I found that when you first start using it, just giving it that fundamental purpose so it can really focus on making what it needs to do well and just focus on that when it's first generating it is really good. Then and your following prompts, you can use it for the other more complicated features. So right now, it just gives you a little overview of what it's working on. So it's creating a beautiful book tracking journal. And as you can see, it's literally spinning up the code. Typically, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes. So just hold with me as it builds. Then we'll look into it. And as you can see, what Lovable and these no code websites are really good for is, yes, making your like company ideas, your ideas for generating revenue really good when you go into something like Superbase or GitHub, which would be for the backend integration. But it's also good at just creating things for yourself that only you will use. So, for example, the prompt I gave it today, I would like to think is pretty creative and also pretty niche. I read a bunch of books, and something I've been thinking about lately is that I'm not going to remember most of them, and I already don't. So, having a way to conceptualize the books I've read and track them, even if it just means having a 1 to 2 sentence summary, even just having the title and name, would be super helpful. So now I'll have Lovable do that for me. As you can see, it's just writing up the code right now. It always starts with putting in some base files and then it edits them as you can see here. So as it continues to go, I'll just talk about the pricing. So Lovable all of the website creators cost pretty similar. Lovable costs $20 a month for the intro user. So actually, let me start off. First, you can use it for free and you get 5 prompts a day, which is really good. And you might think that 5 prompts isn't that much. Like if you're talking to ChatGPT, 5 prompts isn't that much. But with Lovable, you can really action pack those prompts, and it takes a lot of creative liberty. So 5 prompts a day is frankly enough if you're just creating stuff for yourself. But if you really want to be a power user and are using it consistently, then for $20 a month, you get 5 prompts a day plus 100 of the other prompts, which is a pretty fantastic deal. Now I'm going to go into some other general tips. So again, first we had really tell it to focus on that one thing. And secondly, if you want it to creative liberty, don't give it that much information. But if you don't want it to give it creative liberty, if you don't want it taking creative liberty, give it as much specific information as possible and really emphasize in your initial prompt and the following prompts that you don't want to take in creative liberty, because that's a really big thing these tools do is they always take creative liberty. Then going back to the back end that I mentioned briefly earlier, so Lovable works with Superbase, which is essentially a very rudimentary back end. It allows you to do very rudimentary stuff. So what back end is you have front end and back end, and back end is the code that's kind of tracking everything, storing it for you, like an algorithm, if you will. So what it would be very common use of backend would be literally just tracking user information. So every time you go to a website, or not every time, but a lot of times, you enter an email or you make an account, and so the backend would be storing that account. And if you connect it to Superbase, Lovable will actually edit it directly based on your conversations with Lovable, which is super helpful. And then the second little thing you see here is GitHub, which, if you're not familiar with GitHub, it's a pretty complicated thing. It's almost like Google Docs for coding, but obviously infinitely more complicated. And what GitHub allows you to do is export your code so you can use it on more advanced platforms like Cursor and do more like specific intrinsic things. And it also lets you build your code and lets you edit your code directly. So now let's see what it made for us. So it made just a simple dashboard, and what you could also do is you can literally export this very simply, which is super nice. So this is what Level made for us. It made us a simple dashboard with the reading stats, reader status, top genres. So there it's taking the creative liberty and it has currently reading versus recently added. Then it has a page for my library with some pretty famous books, Project Hail Mary, The Psychology of Money, Atomic Habits. What you'll see on this page is the first shortcoming to Lovable. It really struggles with pictures. So as you can see, it has the Atomic Habits and the Psychology of Money pictures, but it doesn't have anything for Project Hail Mary, which is something that you'll really have to figure out on the GitHub side of things and just work around, to be honest. Then lastly, it has the add book. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to add a book. Let's just go with Dune. It's by Frank Herbert. Hebert, actually. Hebert. Cover image URL. Let's see how this will work. I got a feeling this won't work, but we'll see. Dune book. And then I'm just going to go to the URL for it, and don't think this would actually be the best. I'll just go, let's go here. No, that didn't work either. All right. I mean, I don't think this copy image address. All right, let's see. Do that. Then we have the genre. So I'd say Dune is science fiction. I really enjoyed it, so I'm gonna give it 5 stars. I read it back in 2024 in about July. So we'll say I started July 6th, and or let's say I did August 10th, whatever. And I completed it. But my takeaway from Dune was that the best path is not always the cleanest. Let's just go with that. And now I'm going to add the book, and as you can see, it actually gives a picture of Dune. It gives the genre, the date read, your rating, and your key takeaway. Then if we go to the dashboard, it explains how you have completed these books, and it shows them for you and it demonstrates them for you. You can see what you're currently reading. You can see what you've recently added. You can also view the library and sort it by the genres and the search of the titles to see if the titles actually works. And it does right there. So that's pretty cool. So I guess to take this website, my overall review would be I'm actually very happy with this. It gave me exactly what I asked for, which I think is because I was so specific. It gave me a dashboard, it gave me my library, and then allowed me to add books. Something I think I'd probably improve on would be the title. I don't really like bookworm, to be honest. Then some other things you would probably want to do in the future with more iteration would A, just really try to make it so that every book you do have, like Project Hail Mary, is an actual picture. Something else that I'd probably do is integrate in a very simple, cheap API key so that when I do add a book like Dune, all I write in is Dune and my key takeaway, my date read, and my rating. Then it would fill out all this other stuff for me, including the cover image URL. Then two last things is I would try to make the dashboard a little bit more compatible. And then the last thing I would do is I would integrate it with Superbase for the back end. And so that way I would actually add a place for you to log in and it would store all your data there. So every time you opened it up, it would work really well.